What's up, everyone? Welcome into DodgerHeads Live, presented by DodgerBlue.com, your home for the 2020 World Series champion Los Angeles Dodgers. My name is Jeff Spiegel, joined tonight by Matt Moreno. We got a special live Monday night edition. We figure, hey, 2 weeks left in the season, no game tonight. We're here. Matt, you asked me this question before we hop on, and we'll start with the obvious question. It's a roller coaster. As of today, 12 games left, 14 days remaining in the season. How are you feeling about the 2021 Los Angeles Dodgers?
I think relatively confident. I know obviously there have been some up and downs with hitting. Now, if we're talking just specifically for the division, that's a separate answer that we can kind of get into later on. But overall, I think things are going well and the team will be
Yeah,
okay.
Dodgers, as we kind of hinted at, they're one game back of the Giants if you've been paying attention. Both teams off tonight, 12 games in 14 days. Both teams have clinched playoff spots, but the question is, which of the two, Dodgers or Giants, are going to be playing in a one-game playoff in order to qualify for the wild card game? So, of course, we'll talk about that. Could be a one-game playoff for the division championship as well. A couple notes on the Dodgers. Since July 30th, they are 34-11. So the Dodgers winning about 75% of their games, but they've made up just 2 games in the standings over that stretch. They've won twice in a row. They've won 8 of their last 9. And the question, I think, is hitting, and you kind of hinted at it. The good news is, from my perspective, the offense is ticking up a little bit. They've got 9 guys with a weighted runs created plus over 100 over the last 14 days, basically 9 above average hitters. They've got 5 guys hitting over 280, 5 guys with an on-base over 400, 5 guys with a slug over 500. Some of the key names: Smith, Betts, Seager, Trey Turner, Justin Turner, Muncy, Gavin Lux, who we'll talk about, Matt Beatty as well. They're scoring 5.7 runs over their last 7 games as well. So tell me, Matt, we kind of hinted at it. Does this feel like a mirage, or does this feel sustainable that the offense is actually picking it up?
I think it's somewhere in the middle. I get, kind of big picture, it is sustainable. I think they're a good hitting team. It's a lot of the players that we've seen last year, the past few years. Justin Turner knows how to hit. Max Muncy knows how to hit. Chris Taylor knows how to hit. Corey Seager knows how to hit. Obviously, Mookie Betts. Like, they didn't just forget, how to hit all of a sudden. Lulls happen. It's a long season. I think still the concern maybe, and we saw it a little bit on Sunday against the Reds, was, they had the 2 big innings back to back and then kind of went quiet.
Yeah.
So that's where, it's not the offense. I don't want to say it's a mirage, but there is still some ironing out of the kinks that needs to be done.
Yeah, and for me, and we're going to get into a lot of this, so we appreciate the folks joining us on YouTube. As people saying, hey, Jose Rodriguez, Lux has been amazing. We're going to talk Gavin Lux. Craig, Lux is getting better. We're talking Gavin Lux in just a moment, which is going to be great. But I think that's the key, right, is it does feel sustainable because you say, yeah, Will Smith, this is normal. Justin Turner, this is normal. Mookie Betts, Corey Seager, Trey Turner, Max Muncy, this is normal for these guys to be performing at the level. And it does feel like, who knows, injuries could happen even these last 2 weeks, but it does feel like the Dodgers are going to be able to patch together a lineup of 8 guys that you actually feel really good about. We talked about the All-Star lineup. It's not going to be quite the All-Star lineup, although maybe that's a good thing with some of the guys that won't be in that lineup. But as I said, almost 6 runs a game over their last 7. They have been scoring runs. The loss that they've had in their last 9 was a 1 run. So those crop up from here and there. But it has been good. On the other side is pitching. I mean, the pitching has been absurd. This is a stat from John Weissman. The Dodgers in the second half this season, it's the 4th best second half of the year ERA ever. 2.64 ERA. Another person posted their ERA plus, which is sort of weighted against 100. 100 is league average. It's the best in the National League since 1909. That's the entire season, Dodgers pitching. I'll phrase this next question to you, Matt, like this. So much of this season, to me, has been framed through the lens of what the Giants are doing. But I feel like if you just look at the Dodgers and you ignore the Giants' record, you ignore where the Giants have been at, it feels like we should all be really encouraged. The Dodgers are peaking at the right time. And even historically, the Dodgers have won 64% of their games this season. I threw this on Twitter, but basically on par with the 2017 season where they won 642 was the win percentage, a tick below 2019 at 654, and then 2020 was absurd. Almost 72% of their games they won last year. But basically right now, this is the 4th best Dodgers team going all the way back to 1955. It's the 4th best win percentage in franchise history dating back to 1955. So do you feel like this team is underappreciated simply because of what an unbelievable year the Giants are having? Or do you feel like this team is somewhat disappointing?
Yeah, they're definitely underappreciated a little bit. And I think, and it's human nature, right? Like,
Yeah.
as great as the Dodgers have played this season, at the end of the day, they're still in second place in their division, unfortunately. And so that's kind of what the focus is on. I will sort of add the caveat that we had a lot of people over the past few years telling us, when the Dodgers would clinch the division, kind of who cares
Yeah.
mentality, which now this season, I think we're finding out like winning the division actually
Yeah.
means something, right? Like you don't want to end up in a one game wild card. But they're having a great season, and credit to the Giants for having just as great of a season. It's part of what makes it fun. I think coming into this year, we all expected at least, well, not at least, we all expected a 2-team race, right?
Yeah.
It's
Different
the
teams.
Giants instead of the Padres. So in some sense, like everybody's getting what maybe everyone might have been expecting anyway. But now that I think fans and the team is actually going through it, like reaction is a little bit different
Yeah.
to it. And I don't want to say there's some panic, but there's definitely concern. And I get it. The wild card game, you never know what can happen.
Yeah, and just to circle back to that, if the Dodgers were to go 10-2, they would actually tie the second best winning percentage dating all the way back to 1955. If they go 8-4, they would tie for third with the 2017 season. And as we're going to talk about here in a moment, we'll get to the schedule. 8-4 would be a disappointing end to this season in my estimation. So here's a plan for tonight. We're going to do stock up and stock down, which is a segment we normally do, but we're going to have a twist. We're going to focus on two guys that are kind of at the center of that conversation, which are Gavin Lux and Clayton Kershaw. We'll do the weekend quotes. We'll break down the remaining 12 games the Dodgers have on the schedule. We'll get to some mailbag questions as well, including is it good or bad to be in a one-game playoff to win the division? AJ Pollock update as well. So folks joining us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, we appreciate you. Mitchell, Jose, Laura, Jake, we appreciate you. So feel free to throw some questions in there as we go, and we'll get to those in real time, or we'll save some for the end. But let's start with stock up and stock down, and this is kind of the headline for me. The two key figures that over the last week have been incredibly encouraging. We'll start with Gavin Lux. This is a guy who was disappointing. One of my bold predictions at the beginning of the year was that Gavin Lux would be an all-star. Safe to say that did not pan out quite as well as I had hoped. Although I was trying to tell my brother today, I said, we're kind of salvaging that take a little bit here at the end. But this is a guy who struggled mightily, got sent down to the minor leagues. If we're being honest, wasn't exactly killing it at the minor league level. But the injuries started piling up. Cody Bellinger was so bad that they had to try some new things. And since he has been called back up, Lux has been amazing. 0 for 2 with a walk in his first game. Since then, 2 for 2 with a double, 2 runs, and an RBI. 2 for 3 with a walk and a run. 1 for 3 with a walk and a run. Had an 0 for 4. Comes back 2 for 4 with 2 RBIs. 1 for 3 with a triple, a walk, a run, and 2 RBIs. 3 for 4 with a home run, a run, and 3 RBIs. In total, in 29 at-bats, he's slashing .458 on the average, .552 on the on-base, and .708 slugging percentage. And remember, this is a guy who, this is not a fluke. This is a guy who is a top 5 prospect in baseball over the last couple of years. In AAA in 2019, as a 21-year-old at AAA, he hit .392 with .478 on base and .719 slugging percentage. He's just 23 years old. We know the defense. We'll get to that in just a moment. But it's hard not to be encouraged, enthused, ecstatic about what Gavin Lux has done since coming back up.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, credit to Gavin for, he's had a difficult season, not letting it completely ruin the year. His production since he's been up has been not like sort of like the Dodgers have needed every bit of it.
We would have taken a 200 batting average. Okay, he has far surpassed the 200 batting average we would have been content with.
The bottom of the lineup had been struggling, obviously. So what Gavin Lux has given them has helped tremendously, and he's done it also while learning another new position, which I think is impressive and important to note. And I think that's also important to note. We could go into Gavin probably for our own a dedicated show for him.
Yeah,
like you said, he is only 23 years old. We need to also remember he's been moved around. He's a natural shortstop. So his development hasn't exactly been typical with what you would see with another first-round pick, another heralded prospect, right? And it's understandable. Obviously, Corey Seager, they weren't going to ask Corey Seager to move for, Gavin Lux to possibly become maybe what Corey Seager is already. And now the same thing with Trey Turner. So, a lot of I've been on here, how I try to find, the glass is half full to me more times than not, as opposed to half empty. But credit to Gavin, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, the thing for me is, and this is one of my criticisms of Bellinger, is that when Bellinger isn't hitting, he also hasn't been able to draw walks. And maybe those two things are related. Guys are throwing strikes and he's missing. But credit to Lux. Again, he comes back. His first game is 0 for 2. And so you're thinking a 23-year-old, that's easy to come back up, negative self-talk, like, oh man, you're trash, you can't hit up here, blah, blah, blah. He comes back the next day, 2 hits, 1 hit the next. Then he goes 0 for 4. And then it's like, what are we going to do? 2 hits, 1 hit, 3 hit. But on top of that, he's walking. He's got 4 walks over that stretch since coming back up as well. And so I'm nothing but impressed with Gavin Lux. And he's a spark plug. A lot of people in the chat are using that phrase, a spark. That's what he is. He has athleticism. He has speed. And so you can kind of see this Dodger team coming together where all of a sudden Trey Turner's a threat on the bases. Gavin Lux is a threat on the bases. Mookie Betts a threat on the bases. And you just keep stacking these guys. Again, if Lux is your number 8 hitter, you're feeling really, really good about that. The question is, and this is where I'll come back to you, the defense. Now, if the offense stays at this level, like he's hitting 458, he's not going to sustainably hit 458. But if he's hitting 280, like if he can just be a good hitter, I feel like you have to accept the defense, as bad as it might be, as rough as it might be, and just say he's athletic, he'll figure it out. But the gap in offense between him and a guy like Bellinger is so great that you have to take what Lux is giving you, right? Or is his defense concern enough for you to make you pause before throwing him in as an everyday guy in the NLDS?
I don't know, and that is something I'm glad you brought it up that I was going to raise. Is what'll be interesting to see is what happens, and I don't want to jump ahead of our show, but if and when AJ Pollock comes back, I don't know if the Dodgers are going to want to put him in center field on a regular basis and sit Cody Bellinger because of it is a hamstring injury that he's coming back from. Maybe Gavin Lux goes to center field. He did.
Well, when you slide Mookie, isn't Mookie you just slide Mookie over and you make one of these guys figure out how to play right field like that? Because they've put Mookie out there. I mean, I know the hip, but maybe the playoffs you just say screw it, we're all in. If he tweaks it, then we take our chances.
I don't know if they would ask AJ or Gavin to play right field at this.
they ask Gavin to play everywhere else. Like why not? Just figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. Who knows? I know that he did. I think he played 1 or 2 games in center field while he was down at OKC. Okay. So maybe he's the answer there, and you just kind of alternate and obviously rotate Chris Taylor. Yeah. But so I guess I'll answer it from what I think the Dodgers would do. I don't know if he becomes an everyday player still in the outfield once the team is quote unquote back to full strength. Of course, the caveat to that now that we need to monitor is Cody Bellinger's ribs. Yeah. He was supposed to be back in the lineup on Sunday.
Not coincidentally related to the Gavin Lux conversation.
Right. Ironically.
Gavin's just trying to get playing time any way he can. You got to respect the hustle.
So if that becomes an issue, then, the Dodgers are going to need to figure something out. And maybe Gavin starts to play center field a couple days. Maybe AJ plays center field a couple days and Gavin goes back to left. I don't know. I mean, The good news is they have the flexibility. I still, like I've said on the show repeatedly, the Dodgers believe in Cody Bellinger and especially his defense. And so in the postseason, the team has emphasized and stressed, run prevention is key. As much as hitting is also important, they prioritize defense and put a significant emphasis on that. So
Roy asked, why not put Trey Turner in center field? He has played center, but the Dodgers have made clear that they're not going to ask him to play the outfield. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. When they first acquired Trey, I thought center would be where he ended up because Cody Bellinger was struggling. You could put Gavin Lux back at second base, but they had a conversation with him. That was one thing Andrew Friedman and Dave Roberts both said, on their conference calls right after the trade when they were asked about what position he would play. They said, we're not sure yet. We know, obviously, he's played a couple different ones. We want to get him to LA first, have an in-person conversation to figure that out. So they never came out of that and said, Trey explicitly said he wants to play second base, but Dave Roberts basically alluded to the fact that there was an understanding that was the best position for him.
Yeah. And I mean, again, like I'll be fascinated to see whether the Dodgers are willing to roll the dice on some of these things that they've hesitated to once the playoffs. Like once the bullets are flying for real, are they really going to say, hey, Trey, we're going to keep you at second? Or are they going to say, man, if we could put Trey at second, then we can fit some of these guys. If we could put Trey in center, then we can put Gavin at second, and then all of a sudden our lineup gets a lot better. And defensively, that's probably your best option, right? or do we put Mookie in center field and throw one of these guys in right? So let me ask you this, Matt. Why don't you do the Pollock piece now? Because I know you've got an update on the timeline for AJ Pollock, which is a big piece of this. And then we'll just dive straight into that conversation, which is how does all of this shake out once the playoffs do roll around? So Pollock update, and then I'll follow up with a question after that.
Yeah, so this past weekend, AJ was playing in simulated games at Dodger Stadium against the minor leaguers. The plan, obviously, the Dodgers are off today, so we couldn't confirm it because we didn't get a chance to speak with Dave Roberts. But the plan was for today, Monday, AJ to report to Camelback Ranch, where he would continue playing in more simulated games. I think maybe even organized like minor league. I'm not sure what may be going on there at this time of year. And then this weekend, once the Dodgers go to Phoenix to play the Diamondbacks, the tentative plan for now is for AJ to come off the injured list.
Got it. Now for you, I'm going to ask. Matt Moreno's in charge. I'm not asking you to predict what Dave Roberts would do. So let's just say AJ Pollock's healthy. You've got Cody Bellinger as an option. You've got Chris Taylor as an option. You've got Mookie Betts. You've got Gavin Lux, Matt Beatty, if you want to throw that name in there. How do you shake out? And let's just sort of throw out the platoons, because I know a lot of people talk about platoons, and a guy like Lux, a guy like Taylor, maybe there's a platoon. Pollock is crushing every side of the handedness. So that piece doesn't matter. Mookie's in there. So how would you shake out the outfield if you were in charge, ignoring, like, you don't know who's on the mound, you just got to throw a lineup out there? What would you go with?
So I would go with AJ in left field, and I think I would still put Bellinger in. So
Okay.
let's say AJ's back off the injured list on Friday. So this is a series opener against the Diamondbacks. I would probably have him in left field, Cody Bellinger in center field. Considering AJ's coming back from a hamstring injury, I would then sit him Saturday, let Gavin play left field. And then, Cody, I think, is going to need some rest. So I would kind of rotate Gavin there. You also have Chris Taylor, who Chris Taylor can play right field if you want to put Mookie in center.
Yeah.
I think, it's difficult because the Dodgers, as much as you're saying, maybe they try Trey Turner in center field come the postseason. On one hand, that could make some sense in terms of lineup construction and balancing your playing time and all that. But also, the Dodgers have never really been a reactionary team.
Yeah.
And I just don't see them trying something for the first time in the playoffs. That being said, I would give Gavin maybe a game or two in center during the regular season because you don't really know. Cody Bellinger, like, his ribs are okay now.
Yeah.
What if he makes a diving catch and aggravates it and then is out for a few days? Like, you need to kind of have your backup option. Of course, the trade-off is you're also in a division race, so you can't really experiment too much. In the past, when you've been up 10 games, I would say absolutely let Gavin play, make 2 starts in center field, see how that looks.
Yeah.
And then, plan on that, plan however you want after that, but that's not a luxury they have this year.
Yeah, Battyman5 on YouTube wants to know if you've watched Cody Bellinger at any point this season and if you want him starting. I mean, I'll be honest, like, for me, I would take just about anything over Cody Bellinger in the lineup. I understand the defense. I remember talking to Justin Lorber. You and I have talked. Daniel and I have talked. I mean, Cody Bellinger is 3 for 41 in the month of September. And that's on 3. He's 3 for his last 16. So he was 0 for 25 to start the month. From August 18th to September 11th, he had a 5 for 67 stretch with 16 strikeouts and 2 walks. Chris Taylor, not much better. He was 2 for 5 on Sunday, so we can cross our fingers that he's figuring something out. His neck's feeling better. He was 0 for 18 heading into that 2 for 5. For me, Mookie Betts is playing center field. I'll put AJ Pollock. I'll say, AJ, you pick. You feel okay in right? You feel okay in left? You take your pick. Gavin Lux is playing the other position, and we just roll with it. And yes, I know the defense is going to be what it is, but I just think to myself, last year the Dodgers had an unbelievable amount of huge defensive plays that needed to be made. That feels abnormal to me. It feels like the defense was abnormally heightened. So I'm taking my chances and saying I would rather 4 Gavin Lux at bats versus 4 Cody Bellinger at bats, and taking my chances that the value added in 4 Lux at bats is greater than the value taken away in the one play ignite that Gavin Lux has to try and make that maybe he can't make. Because the thing is we're not talking about a lack of athleticism with Lux. It's not like he can't get to the ball. It's a matter of, does he take the right line? Does he communicate, etc. So for me, Pollock, Mookie, and Gavin Lux would be my 3. If you want Trey Turner in center field and Gavin Lux at second, I'm fine with that. But this is my thing. I keep talking about the word urgency. That's what I need to see more of from the Dodgers. Like, once we get to the postseason, we're not saving ourselves for anything else. So I would imagine, by everything I've seen from Trey Turner, that he has a conversation with Dave Roberts at some point, and he says, Coach, whatever you need. Whatever you need. If you need me in center field because Bellinger's hurt and he can't go and he's hitting 090 or something like that. Like, I got a text. It's one of the worst OPS seasons of all time Cody Bellinger is putting up right now. But, like, whatever you need, Coach. Send me to center field. Mookie Betts, same thing. Hey, the hip, whatever. Throw me in center field. I'll do what we need to do. You bring up a good point. That doesn't solve the right field problem because, I imagine A.J. Pollock could probably play a acceptable right field. Gavin Lux, maybe an acceptable left field. But for me, I'm just taking my chances. So, folks that are joining us, I'd love to hear from you. Give me your starting outfield, assuming A.J. Pollock is healthy, assuming Bellinger's available, assuming Taylor's available, assuming Lux, Beatty, whoever you want to include. Give me your starting outfield once the postseason rolls around. Again, this is like the bullets are flying for real. We're not talking lefties versus righties, any of that stuff. Who do you have? So Fernando says, keep Bellinger's glove in center, let him bat 8th. The lineup is deep enough. He won't be a liability. Look, Fernando, I don't disagree, except for the fact that I've watched this team over what feels like the last 2 months, where it feels like everybody, they need it. So again, if Mookie's hitting and Trey's hitting and Will Smith is hitting and Seager's hitting and Turner's hitting, then I agree with you. But I don't think any Dodger necessarily fan feels great about saying, we'll just give him 7 hitters and hope for the best, because we just haven't seen it. So we got another one here. Mookie in right, Taylor in center, Pollock in left field, no doubt. I can't pronounce that name, so I apologize for that. But let's see. Pollock, CT3, and Mookie. So we got 2 of those. That's from Matty Man and something tactical. Taylor, Mookie, and Pollock. That's Craig. So that's kind of the popular one. Caesar, same thing. Pollock, Taylor, and Betts. We did get a Pollock, Bellinger, and Mookie. Pollock, Taylor, and Betts. Maybe Lux and Taylor on a platoon. That's what Laura says. What do you make of Taylor? I think we all have this idea in our heads of who Chris Taylor is, but that doesn't match up with the reality. Again, 0 for his last 18 heading into Sunday's game. He was 2 for 5. We know he's hurt. We know he's been resting a little bit. He comes back. My thing is, like, we've seen the Cody Bellinger home runs where everybody tells us, like, oh, he just figured it out. It clicked. We're here. And then it's like 0 for 19 coming after it. Where are you at on Taylor? Do you have a degree of confidence that he's going to be able to be because, again, we're not looking for all-star Chris Taylor. We're looking for, like, if he can hit 250 and play above average defense, he's taking Gavin Lux's spot.
Yeah, he's had an interesting season. He obviously got off to a very good start and earned an all-star game bid and deserved it. But also, as that was approaching, he had kind of already started to decline in terms of production.
Yeah.
Then came out of the break and spiked up again. And then, like you just highlighted, has been on another slump. I'm choosing to believe that the neck was pretty troublesome. And, he described it as basically like a pinched nerve, which I can't imagine, playing through, much less swinging a bat and having to run around and all that.
Yeah.
So assuming that is no longer an issue, I think we will get a Chris Taylor who can give you the productive, consistent quality at bat. Maybe he's not going to hit a double every time, but he might at least move a guy over or get a sacrifice fly, stuff like that. It's interesting, a lot of the comments, as great as Gavin Lux has been, a lot of people jumped off that ship really quick.
Yep.
And what will be interesting too with Gavin, not to completely get sidetracked, but if Chris Taylor does obviously factor into the outfield picture more than Gavin Lux does, Gavin is somebody who has admittedly said he needs to play on a regular basis for his swing to kind of feel right and stay in rhythm. So what would be a little concerning is if they do end up moving him back to sort of a bench role, does he lose, does his bat not stay what it's been?
Yeah.
But only time will tell.
Yeah, Taylor's such an interesting one because I do agree with you. And look, like, I want to make clear, I'm not an Bellinger hater forever, right? Like, I think every Dodger fan loves Cody Bellinger. But at some point, you have to be realistic and say we're 1 game back with 12 games to go and we're entering into the playoffs. And at some point, this isn't just going to flip a switch. And that's, I think, the difference between Bellinger is his swing. Like, even now they're talking about making adjustments and stuff, but it's like he feels like a guy that's an all or nothing boomer bust. And I highlighted this. I don't have the stats in front of me. He went something like 60 at bats in a row without a walk at one point. When you're hitting like 110 and can't even draw a walk, like it's just not an acceptable approach. The thing about Taylor is, as you point out, it's always at least going to be a competitive at bat. Now, he's been swinging and missing a ton of late. I was trying to pull up his stats, kind of the splits of the last little bit here. And I mean, September and October, Taylor's hitting 100. The month of August, he hit 228. 333 in July, 227 in June. So, I mean, for 3 of the 5 months of the season so far, 3 of the 6 months, excuse me, it hasn't been great for Chris Taylor. Obviously, the first half, like, he was an all-star. He deserved to be an all-star. And part of that is the walks. Like, he is drawing walks, and he is putting competitive at-bats, and he provides a defense. So, it feels like Taylor is kind of a perfect middle ground between Lux and Bellinger. It's not the bat that Lux is giving you right now, but at least it's a much better, more competitive at bat than Bellinger. And he's not Bellinger defensively, but he's far closer to Bellinger defensively than it is. So that does feel like a safer bet too. Like, I'm trying to envision the Dave Roberts saying, yeah, Gavin Lux is my everyday outfielder in the playoffs. It doesn't feel like that's going to happen, even if it makes all the sense in the world. So I think the folks that are onto something there with Chris Taylor as kind of the everyday guy, and then maybe Cody Bellinger. I mean, I don't know. Like, it's not like I view him as a pinch hitting weapon, but I at least suppose, like, if he came up in a big spot and you're down 2 with 2 runners on, you're like, well, there's a 1 in 50 chance that he hits a home run here at least. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, he twice has been relegated to a platoon role, but only for an injury to kind of change those plans. So it's not a stretch to say, come the postseason, come these final 12 games, the Bellinger might be back in that, especially again like with his ribs, and that unfortunately I think really complicates things, because it's one thing to have the struggles he's had this season, to make some adjustments to your swing, to try to get that locked in, and now here you are dealing with a rib injury, even though Dave Roberts did say it bothers him. I believe he said it bothers him more when throwing as opposed to hitting, but it's ribs. I've never had a rib injury, but I've heard from people who have had them that doing breathing is painful. So
and Cody has 4 walks in his last 6 games, so that's a huge uptick. Again, he went a month with 2 walks, so 4 in his last 6 games. He's more walks than strikeouts over the last 6. So, maybe we can get a few more quotes from Dave Roberts telling us how good the at-bat quality has been of Cody Bellinger, because we've only been hearing that all season. Chavez on Facebook saying, yeah, Gavin Lux hitting 232 on the season. Absolutely a fair point. That my Gavin Lux infatuation is just the result of the last week and a half or so. To me, it's just like we've seen so much of these other guys that you give me a spark, you give me a hint. And again, we're talking about multi-hit games after multi-hit games. He's got 4 multi-hit games, plus a game where he's got a hit and a walk in 2 others. So basically, in 6 of 8 games that he's played so far, he has reached base twice. That's Gavin Lux. So I like that. I mean, I'm pro that. He's got one. He's reached base in 7 out of 8. Again, the bar is so low. We're going to talk about Matt Beatty in a little bit. The bar is so low for what we're expecting. I mean, Cody Bellinger realistically is putting together one of the worst offensive seasons. I was comforted to know it's not as bad as Andrew Jones' season as a Dodger was, because I'll never forgive Andrew Jones for that. So I can still hold on to my Andrew Jones hate while not hating Cody Bellinger, which I'm grateful for. But let's switch gears a little bit off of Gavin Lux. Let's go to the other guy who we're talking about, stock up and stock down. A major stock up, the man, the myth, the legend, Clayton Kershaw. 5 innings, 3 hits, 1 earned run, no walks, 8 strikeouts on Sunday. He allowed just 2 hard hit balls. Some of the stats were fantastic. They swung the bat 40 times against Kershaw. They whiffed 20. 50% of the time they swung, they missed. The velocity was down. The slider was about 1.3 miles an hour slower. The fastball about half a mile an hour less. Max Bay, if you follow on Twitter, he's an analytics guy. He said this, just now watching Kershaw's start, he looked outstanding. I don't really care about velocity being at 2019 levels. The slider and the curve were ultra sharp, located perfectly. Fastball velocity might even go up as he continues to ramp up. His first outing a week ago, 4 1/3, 4 hits, 1 earned, 1 walk, 5 strikeouts. So he throws 50 pitches a week ago, 74 last night. What do you make of Kershaw? I mean, how could you not be encouraged? Is this a guy that you're like, boom, perfect, pencil him in to the number 4 starter and feel great about it? Or are you still a little cautious to say, I need to see 1 or 2 more of these before I'm a believer?
Well, I don't know if I would pencil him so far down as 4th starter.
Where are you putting him? Scherzer, Buehler? You putting him ahead of Julio?
Yeah, I am.
Wow.
And again, a lot of that for me is coming from what my expectation would be for the postseason should they end up in an NLDS or NLCS and whatnot. But back to kind of the main point of your question, I think it has absolutely gone better than I expected. Frankly, I thought obviously he was off for a long time. I know he had the one rehab start for OKC, but I expected a little bit of rust.
Yeah.
You would maybe see 2, 3, 4 at least in one of the starts. And his first start was good, and he was even better the second time out against a Reds team that is, obviously it's not, and I don't mean to offend any of the listeners who may be on here. It wasn't the Padres.
Yeah.
It was the Cincinnati Reds, who are in the thick of a legitimate wild card race right now.
Wow. Shots fired. I love it.
So it was encouraging, and really, like, I agree. The velocity I think will probably play up a little bit as he gets back into a rhythm of making more regular starts, and even if the Dodgers find themselves in a postseason series, once that begins too, just from a natural adrenaline rush that you get from that.
Yeah. Okay, we need to circle back to this. Kershaw's ahead of Julio Urias. Julio has 18 wins. Like, I'm not a count the wins guy, but Kershaw threw 74 pitches yesterday. I mean, I'm a playoff Kershaw defender. This is not a anti Kershaw sucks in the playoffs. I need to understand. The people are with me here. We need to understand why Kershaw. Are you moving Julio to the bullpen? Is this like, hey, we don't need 4 guys in a 5-game series?
That's some of it, and the other part is just how I believe the Dodgers would handle things.
Okay.
For a
so
series.
It's more a prediction than a personal opinion, or both.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
It's some of it. Look, and I believe, and people who have seen me on the shows over the past couple of years, I believe in players' track records. I know Julio's had a great season. Take absolutely nothing away from him.
Yeah.
I do believe that his greatest value in October may be as a swing guy, especially now with a Max Scherzer in your rotation.
Yeah.
Had that not been the case, we would be having a different conversation. So, and with Clayton, he's been in the playoffs, and like, I'm with you. I think a lot of his narrative has been exaggerated and isn't reality.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of me believing in, hey, the Grizzly veteran, if you will, still has it in him, coupled with what I expect and am anticipating from the Dodgers.
Yeah, and it's funny because I am not at all anti Julio in the bullpen. Like, I joked because what was it I always forget if it was Game 7 or the World Series. Which one did he get 9 outs in? Was that the World Series? I think it was.
Don't remember. No,
okay.
I think the World Series was the shorter one.
Okay, which one of them he got all of the outs with no strikeouts. Like, every single ball was put into play, which is like the sustainability of that is so low. So I'm not like Julio's not great, but I'm also like, maybe we just pump the brakes on like he's the greatest postseason reliever ever. I'll give you some numbers to that you could use next time you have this conversation with someone. Kershaw this season has a 3.27 ERA. He has a WHIP under 1. He has the 7th best walks and hits per inning pitched in all of baseball. Now, there's a lot of stats you could throw out. Walks and hits per inning pitched for me is big because it's just simply like how many guys are you letting to get on base? Obviously, it doesn't account for like doubles, triples, home runs. It's just very simple base runners. Here's what's fascinating. The Dodgers have 4 of the top 11 whips in all of baseball for guys over 110 innings pitched. Scherzer number 1. Scherzer, by the way, is 0.13 ahead of second. I mean, he is slaughtering the competition. Buehler is 6th. Kershaw is 7th. Urias is 11th. Shout out to the Brewers. The Brewers have number 2, 3, and 5. So I think 4 out of 11 is impressive. 3 out of the top 5 also impressive for the Brewers. But Kershaw, the point is Kershaw's is really good. And so while I can joke about who's number 3 and who's number 4, I think the good news is we're not arguing which guy sucks more. We're arguing which of these 2 guys is better. I can understand that, hey, you just trust Kershaw in that moment. Although, again, Julio is like right behind Buehler and guys that you probably trust in big moments. So if the argument is, hey, it's a 5-game series and we don't need a 4th starter, that'd be one situation for me. But if you're going with a 4-man rotation, I would prefer Julio as my number 3. Just because, I mean, even if Kershaw, look, he'll be fully built up his next start. You imagine he's good for 90 to 100 pitches. And then if he can get one more in the regular season after that, he's fully built up. But for me, I go 4 starting. Someone, Mitchell on Facebook is saying, if you can go 4 deep, you go 4 deep. If you could throw 4 starters out there, you do it, especially if your aspirations are for the World Series. If you can get Game 4 in the NLDS, I mean, again, knock on wood that the Dodgers get there. We're going to get to the schedule and the wild card and all that stuff. But if you can throw a fourth starter and preserve Scherzer, preserve Buehler, and keep them for the next round consistently fresh, I think you do it. Again, they're both lefties, so whether the Dodgers would want to mix up righties and lefties, I can't imagine you move Buehler or Scherzer off of game 1 and 2. But yeah, I mean, I disagree with your take, I guess is what I'm saying, but it's not the craziest thing I've ever heard.
I mean, who knows? We both could end up being wrong if the Dodgers need to play a game 163 and then play a wild card game and then play maybe game 1 of the then at that point your rotation is who's
Tony
healthy,
Gonsolin, baby, give me the ball.
For the if they get to the NLDS, I very much see them putting Julio in the bullpen so that he could impact 2 games possibly during that series. Once you get into the NLCS, if you get to the World Series, you absolutely need 4 starters. And I still think Kershaw, obviously, depending on how everything before unfolded, I still think Kershaw would be slotted ahead of him. But we can have that conversation at another time when, maybe it's a little bit more finalized and we can really dive into it.
Fair. Well, there you go. That's a fun one. I wasn't expecting to have that. While we're in stock up, stock down, I'll throw a few more shout outs out. Justin Turner, Max Muncy both have 4 home runs apiece over their last 13 games. Will Smith has 3, but as you know, Will Smith doesn't get to play very much. He only played in 9 games, still had 3. Mookie Betts, encouragement here over the last 14 days. He hit 354 with a 429 on base and a 542 slugging percentage. Was that because he got moved in the leadoff spot? Who knows? On the pitching side,
it was.
It was. On the pitching side, I mean, Max Scherzer, we could do 100 stats on him. The last 2 weeks, 23 innings pitched, 0 earned runs. He gave up as many runs as Matt and I did. Joe Kelly, same situation, 6 scoreless appearances, no walks. Joseph Kelly, no walks in 6 appearances. How about this? Kenley Janssen, 7 appearances, no walks for Kenley Janssen. And then Alex Vesia, 5 scoreless appearances for him. His strikeouts per 9 over that stretch was 19. So Alex Vesia, good at baseball. Guys, for some reason, can't hit him. So that's the stock up and stock down. Again, we're going to get to the schedule, and we're going to break it down in just a moment. I want to get to some quotes from the last handful of weeks here, or last handful of days, excuse me. Some quotes that we've heard from Dave Roberts and whatnot. Let's start with Matt Beatty. This is a quote from Beatty, and I want to have a conversation about him. He was asked about his last few weeks, and this is what he said, quote, "I'm just going about it day by day. Obviously, it was a little frustrating going down, but just happy to be back with the team, trying to help the team win ball games. Kind of fitting back into my role like it was before I left. That's be a bench bat, come off the bench, have good at bats. Just trying to find my rhythm again. It was kind of shaky my first couple of bats, but I'm starting to feel better in the box. Since coming back up, hitting 250, on-base percentage of 400, slugging percentage of 250 is not great. But again, I never understood why Beatty wasn't getting more at-bats, why Billy McKinney was above him. I understand the defense piece. But 250 and 400 on base, that's acceptable. That's perfectly fine. That is such an upgrade over the bench bat that the Dodgers have had in the past. Where are you at, and where do you stand on Matt Beatty? Because this is a guy who, who knows? Is he a lock for the postseason roster? I wouldn't say that.
No, I think he was already looking at an uphill battle, and the way Gavin Lux has come back swinging the bat and being able to play left field adequately has definitely put more of a squeeze on Beatty. I think, and that's been the story of his season. There just hasn't really been a spot for him. I think it was pretty clear for whatever reason. I mean, there were a couple rough plays that we saw from him, but they didn't trust his defense in the outfield.
Yeah.
And I think that speaks for itself. That became fairly obvious. And with Albert Pujols and Max Muncy and frankly even earlier in the year, Cody Bellinger able to play first base as well. There just hasn't really been opportunities for him. And so I want to say it's a lost season. And obviously you never know, what if, Bellinger's ribs become more of an issue? Well, suddenly that frees up a spot. And I think Beatty would get it over a Billy McKinney.
Yeah.
Maybe this will be my famous last words, but we will see. But yeah, I mean, I think his season, he'll continue to be a pinch hitter for these next 12 games. And I don't foresee him making any postseason roster. And again, a lot of it, this looks a little bit different than what fans and even us analyzing the team have been used to, because like I touched on, other than 2018, they've been able to really experiment to get Matt Beatty, hey, we want to rest Justin Turner 3 days this week, so let's have Matt Beatty fill in at third base. Well, that's not a luxury, and we'll get into the schedule. The Dodgers really can't afford to lose any games if they want to win the division. And so because of that, I know some of the urgency that you've been saying you've been wanting to see. I think we will see it with, the core guys being in the lineup.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting. So last year, the Dodgers, in the NLCS at least, they took 5 bench bats with them. Now, the DH was there, so it's a little different. But I think 5 feels like a number. People seem to be fairly confused at why the Dodgers only have 4 bench bats at the moment as they're trying to navigate some things. But let's say they do take 5. You've got Barnes as your backup catcher, and I am going to emphasize the word backup 100 times because he should never start a postseason game. I know he will, but just know that he should never do it. You've got Barnes, you've got Pujols, and then you were talking about all these outfielders, right? So, like, let's say it's the Pollock, Betts, and Taylor crew. Then you've got Bellinger on the bench. You've got Lux on the bench. And then who's the 5th spot? So if you've got Barnes and you've got Pujols, and then you've got the 2 extra outfielders, isn't Matt Beatty that 5th guy? I mean, obviously, maybe they go McKinney if he's healthy. I don't know what his health update is or if he's even really hurt. But if he is hurt, is he back? And do you just sort of take the defensive side, or is Cody Bellinger kind of your defensive replacement outfielder that just comes in sort of when you're up by 2 runs in the 7th inning, pinch hitting there? But it feels like Beatty has a place, especially just as a competent hitter, because, they've been trusting Bellinger more than him, but I would be hard-pressed in a big postseason game to see Cody Bellinger go to the plate ahead of Matt Beatty, as absolutely insane as that sounds.
Yeah, I think they'll just carry extra pitching, and I think some of that is because they're going to want to be versatile, maybe possibly with Julio.
Yeah.
I assume maybe Tony Gonsolin, if he had a good start, but then his relief appearance didn't go so well. But if he pitches well enough to make it, I think if anything, maybe they switch back to a 5-man bench if they get to the World Series, because at least you're going to be playing, in theory, at least a minimum of 2 games in an American League ballpark where you would need a DH, and so Beatty could factor in there. But honestly, like I'd be shocked of him making the roster before that.
Now, in my mind, the fact that I've got Kershaw, Buehler, and Scherzer as part of my rotation, 3 guys that I'm expecting 6 innings from minimum. And Scherzer, you're expecting more than that. Buehler, the way he's performed. So does that change the equation at all, where you feel like maybe you can go a little bit lighter in the bullpen because you feel like you're going to get length from your starting pitching?
Not so much for me, because I do subscribe to the theory of you can never really have enough pitching. And I think also if Beatty had been, and I understand some of it is he didn't really get the opportunities, but if he had been receiving more opportunities and had been tearing the cover off the ball, then I could see sacrificing a pitcher for another bat off the bench.
Yeah.
But it still is a little bit of a gamble with him in terms of production, and so I just don't know if it would warrant it.
Some people mentioning Edwin Rios. Edwin Rios is hurt. He will not be up. Luke Raley was another name mentioned as a guy that I've shouted out in the past. I think Lux took his spot. And again, Beatty. Both of these guys are better options than both of them. A couple more quotes here. We kind of touched on this one, but some lineup stuff. Corey Seager was moved to the number 2 hole. Max Muncy to the number 4. This was kind of the preferred lineup of last year with Mookie leading off. Quote from Roberts, quote, "I just think Corey's swinging the bat well. He's seeing pitches, taking walks. Right now, Max has been scuffling. So to give him a different look, it's a good opportunity for him." Where do you stand on this? We've talked about one issue with Seager batting second is that he doesn't really give Mookie Betts a chance to steal. Now, Mookie Betts is far less of a threat to steal than Trey Turner would be. So it almost feels like you pair Mookie and Seager together, and then you pair Trey and Muncy together. How do you feel about that 1 through 4?
I like it. I think maybe depending on how Max is swinging the bat, I might do Justin Turner batting behind Trey Turner.
Okay.
And then let Muncy hit 5th. But I think Seager does need to be. There was I don't know what game it was, and I was typing out the lineup to send it out, and I saw like he was batting 6th, and I thought, man, like Corey Seager batting 6th seems a little weird right now. But hey, here we are.
Yeah.
So I think you do need to just let him bat second behind Mookie. It worked last year. I think Seager is comfortable there. He has enough slug that, yes, maybe he's not going to give Mookie a chance to steal a base.
Yeah.
But he could hit a ball to the gap that Mookie has already shown, he can score from first base from. Or at worst case, you have 2 guys in scoring position with Trey Turner, Justin Turner, Max Muncy coming up. You would think that you could get at least 1 run out of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would expect to see more of, Mookie, Corey, Trey, 1, 2, 3, and then I think we might see a little fluctuating with Muncy and Justin Turner.
You haven't even named the best hitter in the entire lineup, Matt.
Well,
Nobody
because
ever mentions
I
Will
already
Smith.
know I
Why
already
is
know
Will
where
Smith not number 4?
I already know where he's going to be batting, so
It's
I'm not even.
terrible. He's the best hitter. He's been the best hitter on the team for like a month, 2
Yeah.
months. So, anyways, you and I both know he's hitting 6th. You could just pencil it in and 6th if he's lucky. Speaking of Trey Turner, a quote on him being more aggressive on the base paths. Quote, I want to be more aggressive. I think at times I can go, but I play it safe. I just want to be more aggressive in general, and if it's there, then try to take it and get in scoring position for the guys behind me, especially when we're playing in a lot of close ball games or if we have a lead and try to stretch that. It's easier to do when you're ahead in winning games like we have been, so just try to keep the pressure on and don't let up. Turner has 4 steals in his last 7 games. Is there any moment where Trey Turner would attempt to steal that you would be mad about it? Or is it just full-fledged green light, he should be running more often?
I mean, I think he has a green light 99% of the time. I don't know. I can't think of a scenario off the top of my head where I would say, hey, he shouldn't be running here. But I do agree with him. You know, I thought he was aggressive immediately after the trade, and then he hit a little bit of a lull. Some of that could have been maybe he's trying to find his place in the lineup or just with the team. And you know, even not stealing a base, like there have been, and I can see the value in him being at first base still is a distraction for the pitcher, right? Because you
Yeah.
keep thinking, okay, he could run on any one of these pitches, and so it still gives him something to think about. Um, I've been of the thought and expectation that come the playoffs, I think we will see a little bit more running from him, and probably even the Dodgers as a team. You know, Mookie, I think will let it loose a little bit more.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, you would like to think in a playoff series, on one hand, you're going to get to know your pitchers a lot better. So that's one option. I was trying to look at so Turner is, since coming over to the Dodgers, he's 9 for 10 on stolen base attempts. Like, just run more. Like, let's double those numbers. And even if that drops to 80%, 8 out of 10 moving a guy in scoring position where a single scores. There we go. Last one here. This is a great story. Mookie Betts. Many of you saw this story. There was a guy on the Reds who got his first career hit. Mookie Betts noticed it, asked the guy from the fans for the ball back. The guy threw it, and Mookie Betts ended up hooking him up. Here's how him telling the story. Quote, I remember seeing Saturday on the big screen. It says it was his MLB debut. He didn't get a hit, so he came up Sunday and obviously saw he hit a home run. I knew it was his first hit, and I saw the guy that caught it. I just asked him for the ball. It was kind of sign language. I said, I'll throw you another ball. That's his first home run. Can you throw it back? He didn't hesitate, threw it right back. I was going to throw him a ball, but I thought about giving him a bat instead so that maybe it would be something he remembers a little bit more. Safe to say, a Mookie Betts signed bat is something that he's going to remember more than a baseball. We know Mookie Betts is amazing. This is just more confirmation that he is equally as good of a player off the field as he is on the field. I know there was a little bit more to that story, but pretty cool stuff from Mookie Betts there.
Yeah, great moment. And I think what really stands out is it was for an opponent.
Yeah.
You know, you expect something like that for teammates. Like you'll see when something has happened for a player on the Dodgers, the dugout will start gesturing, hey, we need the ball, if it was a single or whatever the case was, and they get it back in. So for Mookie to do that for an opponent, I think speaks volumes.
Yeah, awesome. Awesome stuff. Let's do this. I've got stuff on the schedule, but let's get to some questions. So if folks have questions, if you want to throw those in the chat, we'll fire through some of those, and then we'll get to the schedule. If we need to go a tad over an hour, we can. Matt had me fired up with some of his Julio and Clayton Kershaw takes, so we're running a little slower than I thought, but this is good stuff. I love it. I love it. We need this. We need to mix it up. Daniel doesn't come with the heat that you come with, Matt. This is what I'm here for.
Let's remember last year I predicted Alex Wood on the postseason roster, and he was added.
That's true.
And he pitched well.
And he pitched well. That's true. Alex Wood, I do remember thinking that was a terrible take, and that it worked out well for you. He had some huge moments for the Dodgers, and somehow has been good for the Giants this year. Okay, let's see. No questions so far. If we don't have any questions, we could just dive straight into the schedule. I've got the Dodgers schedule in front of me. I got the Giants schedule in front of me. I got the wild card schedule in front of me. I got the NLDS schedule in front of me. So we're ready to go. We'll see if anybody else has some questions. If not, we will dive in. Okay, here's a question. Mitchell on Facebook. Kenley Janssen as the closer for the Dodgers. Any doubt in your mind that Kenley Janssen is the closer? I mean, my only thought would be A, he's been amazing, and B, Trinan, who has been is sort of struggling, feels strong because his ERA has been like 3.5 over the last couple of weeks. So it's like not terrible, but it's probably the worst stretch of his season simultaneously. So this is as confident, I would say, as I've ever felt in Kenley Janssen in years. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I agree with that. Short of a situation where, I mean, now there's going to be, if they get into a postseason series, there'll be off days as opposed to last year where that wasn't the case. So I don't see usage really becoming an issue. But if for whatever reason it was, then you would see maybe Blake Treinen, maybe Corey Knebel, maybe Julio closing a game out for them. But other than that, like Kenley, Dave Roberts has been committed. He's made it clear that Kenley's the closer, even when he hit the rough patch against the Giants coming out of the All-Star break, that there wasn't going to be a change. So I wouldn't expect one now.
And look, Dave proved last year he's not afraid to pull the plug in the postseason.
Yep.
Kenley Janssen was not the guaranteed closer. Obviously, Julio got the 2 biggest saves of my entire life. We're both Julio Urias, not Kenley Janssen. So there you go. Okay, a couple questions here. It is not the DH. Derek wants to know, is the DH in the playoffs? In the American League it is, and in the World Series when you're playing in an American League park. But for the Dodgers, if they were to make it as far as the World Series, the NLDS, the NLCS would all be no DH. The next person asks, you got an insulting team name there. I appreciate the civility. We've got, it feels like an anti-Dodgers YouTube account name, but I'll still ask the question, is the NL definitely going to the DH next year? That's the rumors. There's nothing proven, agreed upon. I think most people were surprised they didn't have it this year. So just a quick answer to that one. Here's a great question for Robert, and I'll start with you, Matt. What percentage do you give the Dodgers of winning the division? I'll give you this, of winning the division without a playoff. So just straight up, 12 games, the Dodgers are ahead of the Giants. What percentage do you give that?
I mean, that's probably down to like 20% at the highest.
Wow.
I think, and I think that's high. And it's nothing against the Dodgers. It's not me doubting them. It's just more that the Giants really haven't been losing, and they have a bunch of games against the Padres.
Yeah, we'll talk about their schedule. The Padres are the best team they play the rest of the season. So when we say a bunch of games against the Padres, their schedule definitely is not favorable. I'm probably a little more optimistic. I mean, the Dodgers, the way they're playing, I'm just convinced it's sustainable. I would say 50% chance the Dodgers win the division outright. I would say 20% chance they end up tied at the end, and 30% chance that they just straight up are behind the Giants 12 games from now. So that's what I've got. Now, if the Dodgers and Giants are in a one-game playoff, Matt, what percentage are you giving the Dodgers in that one game?
About 65. Okay. I think.
I mean, assuming Scherzer's probably on the mound, so you got to feel good about that.
The Giants have had obviously an incredible season. We've watched it from afar, and part of me sort of feels like and wonders are they a team that we kind of saw similar to the Dodgers of 3, 4, 5 years ago, where they're built to play really well for the regular season, but then the playoffs rolls around and it's a completely different animal. I know that they have obviously veterans who have had resurgent years and who have been in the postseason and know what that is like, but I think they also have key contributors who haven't been there yet.
Yeah.
We don't necessarily know how they're going to react. And I mean, I think all things equal, you line up the two teams. I think the Dodgers are the better team. And if, like you said, I was of the opinion we had, after the trade, I threw out, hey, if the, game 1 of the World Series type thing, or game 163 or a wild card game, would it be Buehler or Scherzer? I was still leaning towards Buehler. I am firmly in Scherzer's camp.
Yeah.
Any first big game, whatever, if it's game 163, if it's the wild card game, if it's game 1 of the NLDS, it has to be Max Scherzer. It will be Max Scherzer. And I think you would, if you're the Dodgers, I mean, considering even if he gives up 1 run, because I don't know how sustainable this otherworldly stretch is, you'd have to like your chances.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would go probably higher. I'd say 70-75%, just because if you're giving me Scherzer, there's none of the Giants pitchers that scare me. And while some like Logan Webb, guys like that have been good, I just feel like the Dodgers, I would like my chances, which depending on what day you talk to me, that might change. So lots of good questions. Some of them people are asking about St. Louis. People are asking about some of that kind of stuff. So let's just dive in to the remaining schedule, because I think this is where it gets interesting. So here's the remaining schedule for the Dodgers. They play 3 games starting tomorrow at Colorado. They've got Urias, Buehler, and Scherzer on the mound for that one. The Rockies are 70-79 on the season. They have lost 11 out of 16 to the Dodgers. So Dodgers are 11-5. They are 5-2 in Colorado. We know in Colorado is a scary place to play, but the Dodgers have handled their business. They follow that with 3 games in Arizona. Kershaw, Gonsolin, Urias, the favorites to start for that. The Diamondbacks are a disaster, 48-101 this year. I can believe this. The Dodgers have played the Diamondbacks 16 times, Matt. How many times do you think the Dodgers have won?
Oh, I do. I sort of know. It's like 13 or
14
14.
and 2 against the
Yeah.
Diamondbacks this season. They're 5 and 1 in Arizona. So if we just pause there, Urias, Buehler, Scherzer, Kershaw, Gonsolin, Urias against Colorado and Arizona. Those are 6 road games. From my estimation, I'm looking at that. Anything less than 5 and 1 is a disaster. This isn't win 2 out of 3. This is you have to sweep Arizona and you have to take 2 out of 3 against Colorado, especially with the pitching matchups that you get in that situation. Do you agree? Like, is 4 and 2 an acceptable mark in those 6 games?
Not right now. Not if your goal is to win the
Yeah.
division. I agree with you. It needs to be 5-1 at minimum. Obviously, you can't sit at any point in the season against any opponent to say, "Oh, that's going to be a 3-game sweep." Absolutely, like that just doesn't really
Yeah.
all that often.
The
So
Diamondbacks might be the
5-1,
exception.
perhaps 5-1 is what I think it needs to be. If they end up sweeping Colorado and take 2 of 3 from the Diamondbacks, so be it.
Yeah.
However it shakes out, just you need to win 5 of the 6.
Just know that I'll be mad whichever one they lose, I will be mad. But if a week goes by and it's 5 and 1, I'll feel better. So then go ahead.
I will say really quick, if they go 5-0 in the first 5 games, then they will sweep that 6th one. Bold prediction.
Bold prediction. There we go. So they get an off day after that. Then they get 3 at home against San Diego. Buehler, Scherzer, and Kershaw on the mound. Padres just 3 games over 500, 76 and 73. The Dodgers are 9 and 7 against them this year, 4 and 3 at home. The Dodgers have won 6 in a row against the Padres. The Padres, if you've been following the news, they're 3.5 games back in the wild card. They are absolutely going the wrong direction. The manager's getting thrown under the bus in the media. Machado and Tatis are fighting in the dugout, none of which is good because they play the Giants more than they play the Dodgers. But you get 3 then, and then you get 3 at home in a fascinating series against the Brewers. The Brewers are 91 and 58. They're 11.5 up in the division. They've basically clinched the division. What's fascinating is they really have nothing to play for. They're 5.5 games back of the number 1 seed. That was one sort of piece was, well, if the Brewers are close enough to potentially get the number 1 seed, could they go for it? They're 5.5 back with 12 to go. So you'd imagine that that's a wrap. Dodgers are 1 and 3. They had a 4-game set in Milwaukee. They're 1 and 3 in those games. So I'll be fascinated to see. Again, the Dodgers have it lined up where you get Gonsolin, Urias, and then potentially Buehler. This is me just mapping things out in the last game of the season. Now, if that game doesn't mean anything, they could push Buehler. They could save Buehler. We'll get to the scheduling stuff in a minute. But from my estimation, you need to go 5 and 1 in the first 6. I think you need to go at least 2 and 1 against the Padres. That gets me to 7 and 2. And then if you take 2 out of 3 from the Milwaukee. So if you sweep the Diamondbacks and take 2 out of 3 everywhere else, is 9 and 3 enough to get you? Now, before you answer that question, let me give you the Giants schedule. Because you might say 9 and 3, that's amazing. Giants 8 and 4, we'll take our chances. They get 3 in San Diego, 3 in Colorado, 3 against the Diamondbacks, and 3 more against the Padres. The Rockies might be the best team that they play the rest of the way, which, to be fair, would be the same for the Dodgers. So when you look at the Giants schedule, if the Dodgers go 9 and 3, is that enough to make up at least 1 game on the Giants?
I don't think so. I think you need to go 10 and 2 to close out the season and I think that might only tie you with them to force a game 163.
Yeah. And
I mean, what I'm expecting from the Padres, to just be frank, is they're going to roll over against the Giants and they're going to play lights out.
Where did Optimistic Matt go? Optimistic Matt was here a little while ago. He left.
No, it's optimism with being realistic. It's just like the Padres, they're going in the wrong direction. Yeah. I mean, there's frustration, and I get it. Obviously, they're falling short of their expectations. They're dealing with a ton of injuries, I think, and I can go on a whole other tangent on them, which we'll save for another show once the dust settles. But I think, I know they got they ended up splitting right against San Francisco in Oracle.
Yeah.
So that was honestly a surprise. I thought maybe they would win 1 game and that would be a gift. But at this point, they have 6 against the Giants. I am fully expecting them to go 1 and 5.
So let's say the Dodgers do finish the season tied with the Giants, which is, when you map this all out, where the Dodgers are going to make up 1, let alone 2 games in the next 12. It's difficult to find. Now, that's typically how it works. It just happens, and you're like, hey, we'll take this gift. The good news for the Dodgers is the way that they've set up the rotation. And you'd have to think this was part of the reason why Gonsolin was piggybacking Kershaw, was because they liked the way everything mapped out. So the way that it maps out is game 163 would be Max Scherzer. he would be the guy right after the season. Now, the way that the schedule works, October 3rd is the last day of the season for the Dodgers. If there was a divisional tiebreaker of some sort or a wild card tiebreaker that needed to be played, that would happen the very next day on October 4th. So let's say the Dodgers and Giants tie, then you would have Max Scherzer pitching on October 4th, right after the season ends. Now, what's fascinating about that is because hypothetically, if the Dodgers were to lose that and then be sent back to the wild card game, the way that it sets up, Walker Buehler most likely pitched the last day of the season. Max Scherzer will have pitched the day after the season, meaning Julio Urias, or if you're Matt Moreno, Clayton Kershaw, is pitching the wild card game for you. Now, the good news is if you make it to the NLDS, Walker Buehler would be on normal rest for game 1. So that's kind of why you have Buehler slotted on the last day of the season, because if you do need an extra game, then Scherzer can pitch it and Buehler would be your game 1 guy. So they've clearly thought this through. The hard part becomes if you have to play both a tiebreaker and then a wild card game. So what do you make of that situation? We'll talk about the Cardinals and some of the teams that they could match up, but we've got to feel good, A, that Scherzer is available. Because if you say, like, to me, if they tie for the division, I hate a one-game playoff, but if you're like, the Dodgers are going to lose 2 games in a row to 2 different teams with Max Scherzer pitching at least one of those, I'll take my chances. So I feel good at least that Scherzer is lined up. Obviously, if things go haywire and you don't need Buehler for that last day, I don't know how you would play 2 games in those situations without Buehler pitching the last day. Like, that game would be too meaningful to not pitch Buehler, considering you'd probably be a bullpen game if not. So that's a lot of information, but what do you make of all that, Matt?
Well, just win the division. You don't have to worry about it.
Yes, good point. That's a fantastic point.
I think that's, as much as obviously the one-game scenarios are what you want to avoid, because all it takes is a Luis Castillo to be on top of his game, and possibly shut down your lineup, and you lose, 1-0 or 2-1, whatever the case may be. So you don't want to be in these positions, but I do believe that the Dodgers are built to succeed in this kind of position if it comes to it. They have the starting pitching, like we touched on earlier. Clayton Kershaw being back is huge for them. Having Max Scherzer is huge, and then Walker Buehler, obviously you slot him in however that ends up planting out. But I think if they get into a game 163 against the Giants with Scherzer, like we touched on earlier, I would. Obviously, you don't take anything for granted, but I think the Dodgers would probably win that game. There would be some quote-unquote proverbial assuming that they catch them late. Because I will say, I don't see the Dodgers getting a lead in the NL West and then losing it to the Giants. So if they end up in a game 163, I think it's because the Giants slipped up somewhere and the Dodgers caught them. And so the Dodgers, I think, then would have a little bit of momentum. And I think that is something, there's something to that. I am somebody who believes in that. And then you have Scherzer on the mound. Like, I think you would end up being okay. And then, like you said, the perfect scenario is, we didn't want to play this game 163, but we could lean on Scherzer, and now we can lean on Buehler, regular resting game 1. Clayton Kershaw, game 2 of the NLDS, and I rest my case there.
Jake's asking, could we use Kershaw versus the Giants because they've been so bad against lefties? That game against the Giants would be the day after the season, so it would have to be the regular rotation. I can't imagine you save Scherzer and throw a guy on short rest. Definitely not Kershaw. If somebody would be pitched on short rest, maybe Julio in that situation, but I'd have to go back and look at how it shakes out. I guess I could go back and look. Let's see. I mean, I guess Kershaw would be the guy that, if someone was going to come back on short rest, it would be Kershaw, because Scherzer is usually the guy right after Buehler and then Kershaw. But I mean, where he is at, there's no chance that they skip Max Scherzer and sort of roll the dice in that situation.
Yeah, no way.
With that. Now, the one thing a lot of people have been asking, how do we feel about the Cardinals in the wild card? They currently have a 3-game lead in the wild card. So what used to be a race is no longer a race. 3-game lead with 12 games to go. You've got to be feeling good if you're a Cardinals fan. Here's the bad news if you're the Dodgers. Their rotation lines up so that Adam Wainwright would be pitching the wild card game on normal rest. Wainwright has been fantastic. He's been a guy that's going to finish in the top 5 in Cy Young. He just pitched against the Dodgers. He wasn't amazing, but he did get the win in that outing. And so, offensively, I'm not worried about the Cardinals, but in 1-game outing, people are talking about Luis Castillo, look, Wainwright has been better than Castillo. So if Castillo did that, Wainwright, you would expect even more. Veteran guy, not afraid of the playoffs. That would worry me if I end up with that. And if Scherzer is not available for that game. So if Scherzer has to pitch against the Giants, and then it's Julio versus Wainwright or Kershaw versus Wainwright, I don't love that matchup so much.
Yeah, that's a good point. And we'd have to, obviously it's hard to say definitively until you get to the final game of the regular season with Buehler, because I can't imagine that that's a game that doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
But, in a perfect world, maybe you would cut that. We've seen it in the past where the last start of the regular season is cut short. It's basically a glorified full live batting practice, if you will. But, I don't. So maybe you did that.
He'd be coming back on 2 days rest.
No. Yeah, that's not going to happen.
Because is there a scenario where you're 1 game up and you just say, we'll throw a bullpen game out here just in case we need Scherzer? No, you throw Buehler and you say, if we win this game, then it doesn't matter. It's over with. And if you're tied, you're definitely throwing Buehler because you need the win. And if you're a game back, the game back would be the only scenario where I could see a world in which you say, throw the bullpen game now and see what happens. But even then, you're playing for a scenario in which Buehler maybe never gets pitched. It's the old Craig Kimbrell thing where you plan for a scenario and your best guy never gets off the mound. So you just throw Buehler, and it's normal rest. It's not like you have to save him for the NLDS were you to get there. He would pitch on the 3rd, and then the 8th would be game 1. So it would be 4 days of rest, and you'd be good to go. So I can't imagine. And somebody pointed out the Cardinals actually have a 4-game lead on the wild card because they won tonight. So that is since Eddie. And I don't know. I guess I don't even know who's in second. Is it Cincinnati? I'm guessing the Padres didn't play tonight, right?
The Reds are in it, and I think also one of the Braves and Phillies, because the NL East has become a tight race again, and the Padres, like I alluded to earlier, have fallen out.
Okay. Well, there you go, folks. This has been a great show. We appreciate you joining us, Matt. I appreciate you joining us again. The headline is here: 12 games left in the next 14 days. I guess 13 starting tomorrow. The Dodgers 1 game back of the Giants. Both teams off tonight. Both have clinched playoff spots. The question is who has to play in the wild card game and who ends up facing one another. Again, the schedule for the Dodgers: 3 at Colorado, 3 at Arizona, day off, 3 at home against San Diego, 3 at home against the Milwaukee team that likely will have nothing to play for. The Giants, on the other hand, 3 at San Diego, 3 at Colorado, 3 home for the Diamondbacks, 3 home for the Padres. Again, 4 teams that likely will have nothing to play for themselves, but on the other side of the playoff equation. So we'll see. The confidence level, I always say it's a roller coaster. Depending on what day you catch me, I feel good. The Dodgers made up a game yesterday. I like the schedule for the Dodgers. I do think 10-2 is not a crazy ask from this team. Again, they would tie the second best winning percentage in franchise history dating back to 1955. So it would be huge for the Dodgers. I think 10-2 is reasonable. This 3-game set in Colorado is going to be a big one. I think you feel great about the Arizona series. The Dodgers have owned the Padres of late. I'm not too worried about Milwaukee, although they're still going to play. It's not like they're not going to try, but we might not see some of their main guys.
Another thing with Milwaukee, though, that I think will be worth keeping an eye on is if they feel they can catch the Dodgers in the standings, because then if they meet in the NLCS, that would determine home field advantage. So if there is enough separation where those 3 games aren't going to mean anything for that, then, I think the Brewers, not that they'll phone it in, but we've seen teams, ease up a little bit. But if they can possibly catch the Dodgers in the standings, then that's more incentive for them.
Good stuff. Well, hey, we appreciate you joining us. I see you, Mitchell, Roy, Robert, Derek, Dea, Laura. We appreciate you all joining us. That's Matt Moreno. My name is Jeff Spiegel. We are going to be back a week from now. Me, Matt, and Daniel is the plan. Live on Monday night. Again, another off day. That'll have 6 games in front of us. Hopefully the Dodgers are 2 games up in the division by then, and we're talking about mapping out our NLDS rotation, but we'll see what happens. But the 3 of us will be here live on Monday. Unfortunately, no live postgame later this week. We had a couple of scheduling things line up. So we'll have some short videos for you throughout the week, and then we'll be back, me, Matt, and Daniel, next Monday, and then we'll be full steam ahead as we head into the postseason, a ton of live content, so stay tuned for that. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the YouTube channel, Dodger Blue 1958. Ring the notification bell as well. Check out Dodger Blue 1958 everywhere on social media, DodgerBlue.com for all the latest. Matt, I'm Jeff. As always, reminder, 12 games left, but still champs.
The best team holding a trophy high in the air. The Los Angeles Dodgers, champions of the baseball world.